Recording has begun.
I'm so confused.
Yeah,
What's
so
the intro,
welcome
Mr.
to
podcast man.
I was about to, and you interrupted me. It's par for the course. So apparently, we're doing a pod. It's really not a podcast because we're not. First off, it's not audio and video. Second, it's only available on YouTube, not on any kind of, audio only site. And we don't really have a format. It's really just us talking because that's fun, I guess.
I'm gonna let you in on a secret, Chief. I listen to podcasts on YouTube all the time. Many of them don't even have formats. Most of them get them eventually, though. They just figure out what works while they're playing. Or not playing.
I don't necessarily think a podcast needs a format. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember why they were called podcasts, but it's something to do with they were audio recordings that you could play on your iPod. Why they were called podcasts? Because people were recording being broadcast through Apple. Was that what it was? I'm going to look this up. This is the joy of something that has no format.
So I'm just going to put this in. I'm going to put this
podcasts.
in something really quick. We had perfect audio this entire time. I hit record, and now I'm getting Nate going dung every so often.
It's just because you just don't like listening to me. Don't even lie about it.
Perfect recording.
Every now and again, he just pushes a button. I don't know what could have caused it. I definitely didn't start downloading something in the background a few minutes ago and not really think about it. That's definitely not what happened. It's fine.
Oh.
Professional YouTuber.
Yeah, I'm
this,
good at
yeah, this from our big dick YouTuber.
Yeah, big dick YouTuber, 66 subscribers. Oh boy!
Hey. You got 60 times mine.
The term podcast is derived from the media player iPod, developed by Apple, and the term broadcast, the traditional means of receiving information and leisure content on the radio or television.
Nice.
Oh, pardon me. Journalist Ben Hammersley first suggested podcasting in February 2004 in the Guardian newspaper, but didn't catch on. Danny J. Gregoire later used Podcaster in a mailing list for podcast app developers, seemingly independently, and it caught on and spread from there. So 2004 was the start of podcasting. That's literally all I listen to these days, but that's not the point. To be fair, I think I would have loved, in fact, I know I do love it, radio dramas from the past. I love that kind of thing. There's something nice about audio-only media. It's so accessible to anyone. Costs nothing. All I need is imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, podcasts work better when there's other voices aside from just mine.
Well, you're talking a lot about it, so I didn't want to interrupt you, Mr. Podcast Knowledge Drum. Wow, I cannot speak!
Yeah, that's important for spoken word being the ability to speak.
You were also a machine gun of words there.
Podcast.
I was barely talking. I stopped multiple times to let you interject. I don't know what you're talking about. I never talked.
There is a video of this. I want to see a replay of Nate's words per minute there.
They weren't even words. I stopped for a femtosecond in between each word. That was more than enough time for you to interject.
Okay, here's the thing. This is a podcast. There's going to be basically zero editing on this shit. So no, you're not going to see nothing.
Okay, well, if you are watching this, go back and find out Nate's words per minute.
Yeah, so not only does a podcast require you to use your imagination, we're now making you do the editing as well to prove points because we're really not putting any effort into this at all.
That's the point of a podcast, to have zero effort content.
I mean, it kind of depends. A lot of the podcasts I listen to are scripted ones that are a series. They are essentially an audio drama. I don't know if you guys ever listened to those. It was a big thing when I was a kid. My parents would let us listen to Odyssey.
I never listened to them growing up, but I am now listening to the Magnus Archives.
Yes. They're fantastic. They are Christian audio dramas, so a lot of people wouldn't like them, but they're very well produced, and it's basically just TV in your ears. So, Audible is another example that more people would know, I guess.
Yes, that one's much more common, as they sponsor half of YouTube at this point.
Yeah, although Audible is mostly just one person reading an audiobook, but they do also have a fairly decent collection of dramatized series as well. Very good example.
Cast.
The Redwall ones. Those are great. They have full casts and are very well produced.
You know what said? The one Redwall one that I've listened to was one single person.
Well, see, they also have those, but you have to look for the ones that are done by Recorded Books. Recorded Books was a company that did all dramatized books back in like the 90s and early 2000s.
Ah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. The only reason I even looked that one up is because we had one Redwall book growing up, and I actually never read it. So I decided I'd finally listen to it, and that's the only reason I got a Redwall book. I don't plan on reading the rest of the series.
If you've read one book, you've read all of them. This isn't a hit against the series. I really loved it as a kid, but every book followed the exact same formula. It had the exact same story beats. The characters were all cookie cutters of the same in every single book. Fine for a series directed at 13-year-olds. Perfectly fine. Well-written books, but very little to gain from the different books. That being said, I still think it's worth listening to the audio dramas of them because they're all enjoyable.
That's fair. There's a lot of books that I read because I liked them as a kid, but now if I were to read them, I just wouldn't enjoy them. I tried to get back into the Animorph books, and I just couldn't. It's just a brick wall, the writing. Then again, also knowing how poorly that series ends doesn't help me get back into it. Knowing that the ending of the series is balls.
Well, you, Kevin, you know anything about these types of things?
Nope. Can't say I've ever used them. Can't say I have anything really to add to the conversation.
Never did anything audio related?
The last audio related thing I did was back in grade 12, and that was for English class, something to do with Shakespeare. That was the last time.
I'm surprised
not
you
even,
don't
not
listen
even
to
Audible,
audiobooks
eh?
while you work.
Yeah.
I don't have... Okay, all I have is a phone that is a piece of garbage, and I don't have headphones.
I mean, I know what I'm getting you for your birthday now.
Can this be remedied? I don't know.
I'm just gonna buy Kevin a ridiculously cheap MP3 player loaded up with audiobooks and send it to him for his birthday from Amazon. There you go.
That sounds like a good idea. I know some good audiobooks for
it would
for
literally cost like $20 to do that. Yeah. That's another thing. Podcasts are so easily accessible now because most of them are free, and like an MP3 player costs next to nothing on Amazon now. Like they're practically free.
I'm curious, actually. MP3 player.
Well, I know I bought one for $20 a while ago just to test it, and I got a video one for $20, and it worked fine. No issues whatsoever.
The top result is a $40 video MP3 player.
Yeah. They're practically like almost free. It's because most phones right now are MP3 players, right? There's really no reason to get one unless you don't plan on getting a phone that can do it.
Yeah. I like how I'm looking through the MP3 and it's recommend iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. I actually prefer older audio dramas myself, but new ones are also quite good, especially if you find the right ones. D&D Let's Plays are essentially just audio dramas. And that's what made me want to play D&D with you guys again. So there you go, Kevin. Thank you, podcasts, for making me play D&D with you.
Yeah.
Make it sound like it's a punishment.
Playing D&D? Kinda.
Can be.
Ow. Ouch. Sorry.
It's not directed at you. It's just that any game that relies heavily on RNG can sometimes be very punishing.
The other thing is, it's not the DM who makes it punishing. It's the TPKer in the party who does, which makes it.
We've also had a few false starts in D&D, which can be quite painful as well. There's a lot of invested time for nothing, and it can tell. It just takes one person to do that, and that's always a pain.
Yeah, it's definitely harsh. Trying to find a good group, especially during a pandemic, can be very difficult.
I mean, considering we used to do D&D at Mike's house and at Kevin's house, and all of those sessions died, it was always kind of hard to get a session. It's because it takes such an investment of time, right? It takes multiple people and an investment of time. It's really difficult especially when people have lives. I think it's actually almost easier, on Discord than it is anywhere else.
That is fair. Like for me, it's way easier on Discord than anywhere else. Straight up. As living, multiple cities away from you.
Yeah. Well, plus none of us has a lot of space. We don't live in the grand mansion or anything, so it's kind of hard to get a tabletop game going on a tabletop.
That is also
dear.
true.
Yeah. Yep. I had an idea there for something I was going to say, and it just it was there. I said that we don't have a lot of space, and it was gone.
Nate,
completely gone.
What is your most recent audiobook you listened to?
Oh, audiobook or just audio thing in general? Because if we're going by strict audiobook, it would have been probably, I think it was Jeeves and Wooster collection on Audible. I believe that was the last one I listened to on Audible. Although, actually, I can just check. I've got my phone right here. What's the one at the top of the list? It's loading. Sorry. This is slow.
It does happen.
Jeeves and Wooster was the last one I listened to.
That sounds very strange, Mr. Jeeves and Wooster.
Do you not know what Jeeves and Wooster is?
Never heard of it.
So it was I think it's either British or English, not that I'm sure what the difference is between those, because I'm not either. Comedy series written in the mid-1900s, I believe, by someone called P.G. Wodehouse. And then it became a sitcom. Hugh Laurie, the guy from House.
Oh, yeah.
And Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry? He was in V for Vendetta. He was the Parliament Minister who was a good guy.
Maybe?
If you looked up Stephen Fry, you'd recognize him. He's quite a prolific actor. They played Jeeves and Wooster. Hugh Laurie plays Wooster, and Stephen Fry plays Jeeves. Basically, what it is, it's a comedy, kind of in a fictionalized version of England. In the mid-1900s, he is a rich young man who has a manservant named Jeeves, and he basically gets into comedic trouble with his family and members of the opposite sex, and his butler always gets him out of it, but always in a kind of schemy way that's usually quite funny. It's the typical kind of old-style humor that's very, non-offensive, but also would be considered offensive now just because of how it is. But, it's really enjoyable, and I got I got two versions of it on Audible, actually. I have the radio dramas, because I like those. And then I have the actual one that is just the straight book read by Stephen Fry. But, it's quite funny. I like that kind of humor. It's a lot of stuff that wouldn't really track well these days, because basically all the trouble he gets in is, his uncle's cook is going to leave because he's French and he's easily offended. Because he's a temperamental French chef, and his scheme to get his two friends back together has somehow offended the chef, and it's a bunch of convoluted. It's basically an old sitcom. It's an old sitcom. That's the easiest way to describe it. It's situations that don't really track with the people of today at all because we have no experience with it, but it's still quite well written, and I quite enjoy it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
They would be one of my most hated type of reads because I fucking hate sitcoms.
I hate modern sitcoms. I don't like modern sitcoms. I like the older ones because, first off, it's not really playing on life that I could see. How I Met Your Mother, Friends are in some ways similar to what life is like now. Obviously not realistic in any way, but it's a parody of more modern life. This stuff is stuff that never happens.
That's fair.
I don't know about you, but I don't have people wanting to get engaged to me just to spite somebody else on a regular basis.
I kind of wish I did, but unfortunately, no.
A lot of the problems he gets into ends up with him getting engaged to someone because of an awkward situation, and he has no interest in getting married.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Also, As an old
Sorry.
miser, I'm never going to have that issue.
Yeah, I know, right? Kevin,
Yeah.
what's the most recent bookish type thing that you've got a history with right now? Because if you haven't listened to Audible, have you done anything book related of late?
Have you read, listened?
Okay, so reading, that's a thing I do. So apart from I guess the Dungeon and Dragon books for like campaigns and stuff like that, you're like I guess more standard book I guess would be probably the zombie series from Darren Shan. And then before that would have been back in like so that was probably 5 years ago. And then before that would have been back in high school when I read the Cirque du Freak series.
I mean, I'm not doing much better. The last book I actually read was I read halfway through a David Weber sci-fi book, and then it got too political and boring, and I stopped reading. Plus, it was like 700 pages. And that was
There's too many.
That was about 2 years ago. I got about halfway through it, and then I just couldn't bring myself to finish reading it.
Well, I count reading and listening to audiobooks as the same thing.
I was actually about to say who counts that, but it really... I hate it when people do that because it's really not reading. It's really not.
It honestly, it does activate your mind and keeps you going, and it's shown to have similar benefits to reading.
I'm not saying it's bad. I do it every single day. I love it, but it's still not the same as reading. It's really not the same as reading. I would say that it is a decent substitute for people who will never actually pick up a book.
As someone who both reads and listens to audiobooks, they run exactly the same for me. I don't really get more or less of an enjoyment out of one or the other, unless the audio reader is especially shitty or especially great.
Considering that I usually like to listen to ones that have a full cast, I get a lot more out of listening. Or if I listen to someone reading it, I usually like to look for someone who like tries to like tell the story with different voices or like inject some like emotion into it.
Oh yeah,
so you can tell who's talking.
If they don't emote while they're reading, I won't listen to it. That's horrendous. Like,
you know, it's a great
book I've ever
series.
done has always had that emotion. Which one?
The Ryera Chronicles. That's a good one. It's a small time author. He wrote a bunch of they're basic fantasy. Quite enjoyable. It's the same kind of stuff. You're in a fantastic world with elves and humans and stuff like that, and you follow around these two guys who are part of a group called Ryera, which is the elfish word for two, because there's two of them, and they're basically criminals, but they're not like bad guys. It's a basic fantasy story. You know, they get into adventures. You follow their adventures, but there's an overarching narrative that goes along with their adventures, and it culminates in the big grandiose conclusion. So it's like it's a typical fantasy book. There's nothing particularly outside the box about it, but the characterization is good and the world building is good. So that's all that you really need.
So for me, recent reading wise, I've been reading the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and that's a great series. Dark as balls, but really great.
So a series that I love so much, and I think I actually talked to you about this one before, was the Farseer trilogy. I love it so much.
Yep.
Yeah, love that trilogy. There's 9 books now, actually. I've read them all. I read all of the side books. Some of them are really good. Some of them are really bad. That author hates her characters and is always trying to make them suffer, which is very unfortunate because I really like her characters.
Yeah.
But great series. Terry Pratchett also fantastic.
Do you like detective and or mystery style books?
I do indeed, but it depends on the type.
I highly recommend Stormfront by Jim Butcher.
Yeah.
It is the first of the
Yes, Audible.
Audible. What's the main character's name? Damn it, I can't remember the main character's name now. Oh, it's all about a detective who is in fact a wizard. The Dresden Files. The Dresden Files, that's what it's called.
Oh, I've heard of that. Another one I like is the I love Christopher Stasheff's novels. They're older, but it's basically a nice blend of fantasy and sci-fi where it's like future tech, but the colonies have been separated from Earth for so long that they've reverted to medieval. And it's really interesting because like the people on the planet believe in magic, but it's not magic, it's all just science. And it's super weird. But then there's also that one that I told you about, which is also written by him, where they're in a universe where rhymes equal magic. It's called The Wizard of Rhyme, and like songs, rhymes, poems all become magic. So you have to be really careful what you say.
Rappers would just annihilate people in that universe.
I mean, it's legitimately it is an isekai before that was a thing, because the character is a English teacher and he gets dragged over there, so he is like ridiculously overpowered over there because they don't have that kind of thing in their world. So he can easily put together verses and things like that, and he can just like use all this ridiculous magic.
So I love historical isekai stories. There are some absolutely hilarious ones that have been written like hundreds of years ago that are just so silly. One I remember reading, and it's about an American engineer who gets sent back in time to like King Arthur's time, and he ends up revolutionizing the entire world in insane ways, creating public road systems, all this kind of stuff. Hundreds of years before modern era, or I guess the modern era of 1900 or 1800. No, 1800. And then what happens is Merlin, to spite him, wants to get back at him and does all this stuff to basically lock him in a small chamber where he has to magically go to sleep for a couple hundred years. And undoes all of his work and completely erases the fact that guns and bombs and roads were all invented in King Arthur's time, and it goes back to our timeline, and he sleeps for hundreds and hundreds of years and then wakes up in the modern era. And it was written in like 1801 or something like that. It was old ass book, and it ruffled a lot of people's feathers in Britain.
Wonder why.
Yeah, very funny. I love shit like that where it's like, oh, you were just a few hundred years before the big popular boom.
So something that I found that I actually like for when it comes to detective novels, I've always liked Sherlock Holmes, but something that I found out about that I didn't realize, which always makes me laugh, going back to something modern that happened a long time before, like an isekai that was written hundreds of years ago, is fan fictions that were written back before fan fictions were a thing. I got a thing on Audible, actually. I was looking for the longest thing I could find because I was trying to get through like slow days at work. So I found an 80-hour long Sherlock Holmes collection. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're all stories written by other authors based on the Sherlock Holmes canon from like the 1800s. And I was like, so this is just like historical fan fiction then, right? And that made me laugh really hard. And some of them are actually so much better than Sherlock Holmes's original stories. That's not the point. Some of them are also much worse.
There's always some hit and miss when it comes to fan stories. Sometimes you can get some good ones, but often there's some pretty rough ones.
It's just super funny to me that it's like, yeah, fan fiction's been around since like 1805, and it's like, oh.
It just never had a name until then.
Yeah, it just wasn't called fan fiction. I think they called them pastiches.
They're also a lot older than that, as like
obviously,
a lot of ancient people love doing that, and so we've got all kinds of records of that style of storytelling going back thousands of years.
It's just kind of crazy when you think about it, that all of the stuff that's like, prolific now has been around for so long. It's just like we didn't think about it in the same way, because it's like fan fiction has a really bad reputation right now. Like it's basically like, oh, they're just gonna write a pornography about their favorite characters.
Well, that is what most fan fiction is. Most fan fiction is just smut.
I know, but it used to not be. It used to actually be legitimately people were like, I like this series, they're not making it, I'm going to make what I think is a good version of the story. One of my favorite ones I found it at the library discard was Sherlock Holmes versus Dracula. And man, did I love that novel because it was dumb, it was stupid, but it was great. It was super entertaining. It was just off the walls ridiculous, and I loved it.
Did Sherlock do that premonition thing where he just looks at them and can estimate the next 5 moves?
No, that was a thing that they basically made up for that movie. No, in this version, it turns out that Sherlock Holmes is partially vampiric, but that's fine.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
Why
he apparently looks exactly like Dracula, so they get confused about it because apparently Sherlock's actual father was Dracula's half brother. So it's just cool, man.
Wait, Sherlock was at the same time as Vlad Tepes?
Dracula, depending on the depending on the iteration of Dracula, isn't always Vlad Tepes.
I guess that's fair. That's more very modern.
You're giving way too much credit to the author who wrote this. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it, but man, was it an acid trip. Like at the beginning, I'm like, what's happening here? I'm so confused, and then it's like Watson got confused. He thought he was helping Sherlock escape when it was actually Dracula. I'm like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, it turns out Sherlock had 2 brothers. One of them had to be killed because he took too much after his vampiric father. I'm like, what is happening right now? This book started out like actually somewhat serious, and now it's just ridiculous. Like, I enjoyed it, though. I'm not going to lie. It was a 25-cent discard from the library. Well worth that 25 cents. It was worth at least like $10 I would have paid for that experience.
Wow.
Oh my.
Yeah, I would have paid $10 for that, man. I'm not gonna lie. There are times when some of the books I've appreciated the most have been ones I have found either at like a thrift store or discard lot, or at like the dollar store. Like if you go to like Dollar Tree or Dollar Giant, they'll have like books in like the one section where they get like the books that the warehouses couldn't sell. I found some really good books in there. Like I found this kids fantasy series called The Beyonder. Again, it was a relatively basic isekai, like, fantasy novel for, like, mid-teenagers, whatever. I got it for $1. I read the 2 books, and I was like, this is pretty good. And because I only paid, like, $2 for it, you don't go into it with, like, heavy expectations. But I also find that a lot of books that are written for, like, young adults, normally they're a lot quicker with the pacing, so they can be a lot easier to digest.
They also use a significantly more basic vocabulary, right?
Yeah, and there's often also not quite as much like beating around the bush. Don't get me wrong, like obviously there is a lot of merit to a lot of other books. Like I have read a lot of other like more like the Weber books that I was talking about earlier. Those are a much more adult science fiction, but because of that there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of like military ranks. The characters have all adult like boring problems, and it can get a bit dry. It is a very well written series, and the world building is really well thought out, but you can only go so far into it before you're like, I need to take a break from this because the books are just too I can't really think of the word. Yeah, they're not really heavy because it's like everything in it is fake because it's sci-fi, but it's also like just too realistically unreal, I guess is how you would put it, because they've all got these like problems, like I'm having a relationship problem, or my government is having problems pushing through this thing, and it's like, man, this is what I was hoping to imagine right now. Political unrest. I needed more of that.
That's fair. Yo, man, you want political unrest? Read The Wheel of Time. Imagine a series. Imagine a time period where there are people who are born with magic powers. Yeah, basically walking nukes, and half the population who gets born with these magic powers will go completely and utterly batshit insane.
I mean, I'm looking over at my books right now, just to see what other stuff I have. I've just always liked books, and you know me, I collect random stuff. I also love my Fawcett Media comic book collection. And those are all newspaper comics that were released in these tiny little comic books that are about a little bit smaller than Archie book size. Those are pretty great. But a lot of those aren't produced anymore because some of those comic books are a little bit offensive. You won't see a lot of people who like Andy Capp these days, if you guys know who that is.
Nope.
So Andy Capp is a British comic serialized in, I want to say like 1940, but it's probably closer to 1960. It's about a guy who lives on welfare with his wife, constantly is abusing his wife and going out with his girlfriends and getting drunk all the time. There's a lot of comics depicting him punching her out. She's punching him out. They're getting in fights at the bar. No, but I mean, it's very. It's hard to describe it if you haven't looked at it.
I'm okay with this comic getting canceled. Holy crap!
The comic is very indicative of its time, and the comics do get a chuckle out of me every now and again because they are quite funnily written, even though the subject matter is definitely not appropriate. I do prefer the comics where she punches him out, I'm not going to lie. But the comic itself is quite funny, and if I look at it from the perspective of the time period, not excusing the content, but the comics are still funny, it's just that there's a reason why they don't make them anymore. Although there is technically a statue of him in the town where he was created, and he is still the not spokesperson. What is it? Mascot. He's a mascot for a brand of chips in the States. Still. So the character does still exist. It is still out there, but you won't find the same comics anymore. There's that. There's Hagar the Horrible. I have those. I've got Peanuts. I've got BC, which has nothing to do with British Columbia. It's actually a comic about cavemen. There's The King is a Fink, which is another comic series about medieval people.
Yeah, you definitely are way more into comics than I ever was. I got a few of the Marvel and a few of the DC, and that's it. I could not care less for most of the rest.
I'm kind of picky, though. I like those other comics because they're from a different time period. They're kind of like a time capsule into what was considered the humor of the time. And some of it is still quite funny, but a lot of it's unrelatable. It's completely unrelatable, and it's interesting to read it. Because like a lot of these comics would no longer be acceptable. Like they're just not acceptable anymore. But at the time they were fine. And they were considered like family-friendly comics. And it's really interesting. And then there's stuff like For Better or For Worse, which I think is probably the best newspaper comic ever made. Because it has an entire progression through the entire lives of these people. And it's actually really well written and is like, and if you read it as you were growing up, which me and my brother did, the characters literally aged as you did. And like when the comic finished, I was about the same age as the kids had been when the comic finished. It was such an interesting experience.
See, that could be very closely associated with a lot of Potterheads, as they had a similar experience where they grew up with the books, and when the books released, they were adults at the same time, which is a very unique experience whenever you get to grow up with any series.
It is interesting. The reason I like it better with For Better or For Worse is because For Better or For Worse is literally a series that follows their entire progression as a family, and it's completely, everything in it is realistic events, stuff that people have actually like gone through. It's not like I became a wizard. But no, I have heard people say the same thing about Harry Potter, and you're always going to have good feelings about something that like aged with you because it's like you said, it's a unique experience.
Yeah, for me it was what is it called? The Ranger's Apprentice series was a series that I started reading when I was young, and I matched age for age with the main character growing up. And main character's name is also Will. So that's a series that I loved up until the 10th book, which doesn't exist.
They have since re-released For Better or For Worse, but they've also censored it. Which is kind of aggravating because there was nothing really offensive in there, but you know.
Yeah, in this day and age, they're safe than sorry.
Kevin, any kind of any series of any type that kind of grew up with you, not necessarily book related?
Series grew up with.
It could even be a franchise.
Not really. No, like I didn't have anything quite like the same experience you had. Like, I mean, yeah, nothing really. Kind of depressing now that I think about it.
Give me something nostalgic from your childhood that you still like follow now. Is there anything like that? Like any kind of franchise slash series slash anything that you were into when you were a kid that has kind of come with you into adulthood? And I say that with heavy air quotes, adulthood, by the way, as we sit here playing video games.
No, not really. Like the closest thing to that would, I guess, be like Nintendo.
Yeah.
That's something that I've like had as a child, and like even now, I still will play the games or watch something Nintendo related, right? So that's I guess like the closest thing that's like something that I've taken from my childhood till now.
It's super funny to me, like how profitable nostalgia has become right now. Like we are not that old. Like in the grand scheme of things, I'm almost middle-aged, but I'm not quite middle-aged yet. I'm still what would be considered a young adult. I really don't have any cause to be heavily nostalgic, but I am, and I waste a lot of money on nostalgia type things. Like I've got the special edition NES Lego kit where you build a tube TV and an NES set of Lego. And I didn't even have an NES as a child.
So the big reason why, well, one of the big reasons why we're such a nostalgic generation is never in human history has things progressed so fast, right?
It's very true. Yeah, things have changed like overnight.
Things are, like you said, tube TVs. The amount of technological change between us being kids and now is greater than multiple generations in the past.
Oh, it's so true, man. My first resume was on a floppy disk. And like that would have been when I was like 16 or 17, so that's only like 13 years ago. Like that's not a long time to go from floppy disks to like having multiple books on my phone. I could have
computer in your pocket.
I could have an entire library's worth of books on my phone when before I could have 5 Word documents on a floppy disk 13 years ago.
I remember when a cell phone was a massive investment that only a few people, let alone kids, would have.
I remember when no one in my school had a cell phone. It wasn't until I was in grade 9 or 10 that I got a cell phone. And it was not, it literally could play Tetris and play music, and I felt like the coolest kid.
When I was in grade 9, a friend of mine named Tevin, he had a watch that could take pictures, like 144p pictures or less, maybe even 56 by 56, teeny tiny little gray and black and white pictures.
Dude,
he had the most advanced tech in the entire school. It was the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, no, dude. Like there was literally a time, and this is kind of embarrassing, but the first time I saw an MP3 player, I said, "How do you play music on it, though, man? Like, there's no way to stick a disc in there." And he's like, "Nah, the discs are just really, really small. It's fine." And I totally believed him because I didn't know about like computer transferring, man.
That's fair.
I was I had no reason to doubt him. Like that's the it's actually crazy when you think of how much technology has changed. Like I have a mini DV camera, like a video camera that has the tape in it, the small tapes, and that was considered top of the line video equipment in like the year 2004.
Yeah. Like, it's not that long ago, realistically speaking. As, again, before maybe 200 years ago, people would spend their entire lives in one town and maybe move a house over. Where
that's
then
so crazy,
they got to a point, in the last 100 years, where things started moving and people actually would move to different houses and they kind of spread out the family a little more. To now where, every 5 years... all your tech is out of date, and you're updating and upgrading constantly.
It's so much sooner than 5 years, though, man. It's like half a year. My phone, my S10 was obsolete when I got it, and it was only half a year old.
Yes. So the eternal marching forward of tech it's made us nostalgic because things are constantly changing at this point. So any sort of, I don't know how to say it, any sort of stability we latch onto. And so the biggest stability is nostalgia. We recognize that. We don't have to build stability with that. That just exists.
And I do kind of miss, like, I'm going to ask, Kevin, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, so you better be prepared to talk again.
Oh, boy.
But until then, it was just, it's such an interesting thing to me because I like toys. Okay, I've always liked toys. I like collecting toys. It's a really interesting trend right now is to re-release toys that were originally released in the 80s and 90s. The exact same toy, but with modern plastic. And it's super crazy to me because what they've also done is, so for let's use Beast Wars as an example. They have created new modern versions of the Beast Wars that are really highly detailed and really, really well made. That's really cool. But then right after that, they also re-released the original Beast Wars. Like the original Optimus Primal and Megatron, Cheetor, all of that. They're all at Walmart. Like, as we speak right now, they're at Walmart. The original toys from the 90s. It's such an interesting thing to me because I've also got all the old He-Man toys now at Walmart. Because I just walk down the toy aisle every now and again because I'm a big child on the inside. And they've got, like, the original 80s He-Man molds have been reproduced. And it's just so crazy to me. Also, the prices on them is ridiculous, but we're not going to get into that.
Making bank off your nostalgia.
Well, let's just put it this way. I think we spent, on my original Megatron Beast War that we bought at a toy convention, my friend CJ bought it for me. I think he paid $30 value for it, right? Very cheap. It could probably sell for about $70 or $80 because it's complete. The new one is $70 or $80. And I'm like, okay, like, that does fit with the price point of current leader class Transformers, which is mind-blowing already. Having to spend $80 on a plastic toy. Mind-blowing. Because what parent can afford to buy that for their kids when they're just going to break it? I cannot fathom it. But that is so much money for a toy. Like, I am used to buying adult figures, like, let's preface that, okay, you filthy-minded individuals. Yeah, I was gonna say, I am not talking about what you're thinking about. I am talking about toys that were made for an adult collector that are multiple hundreds of dollars because they are highly detailed, they have a lot of pieces, they're very fragile, but they're literally for someone who has disposable income and wants to, like, own something really cool. Like, I have a giant robotic Gundam thing that's completely made of die-cast, has 1,000 gun ports that open up, and has a humongous diorama that he comes with. That was like $350. That is a toy made for an adult. It is not made for kids. Kids are not supposed to play with that kind of thing. I understand paying a lot of money for that.
Here's the thing. Disney disagrees with you. They still think children are the ones that are buying their $3,000 Death Star Lego sets. And then are surprised
3,000?
when...
Yeah.
Some of them are that expensive. And then they're surprised when those sets stopped being bought when they shat on the adult fan base of Star Wars.
Yeah, no. I feel like I was a very lucky child. I was very gifted. My parents bought us a lot of stuff. They bought us what they could afford, but they couldn't afford a lot because a lot of stuff was really expensive. Lego's always been expensive, but it was never as expensive as it is now. Like, before, I would still get a Lego kit for Christmas if I wanted a Lego kit because it was like $60. Now, if I wanted an equivalent size Lego kit, I'd have to give them $400. Like, that is just such... I just don't understand how parents are supposed to buy toys for their kids. I really don't. Because, like, a lot of the toys are just too much. Like, $100 is 4 hours of work for a general person.
Yeah.
That's a half day's wages. That's a lot.
So I count myself very lucky. I was never a fan of Lego. That is such an expensive hobby to have these days. But yeah, it's not realistic that it's for kids anymore. Like,
No.
hopefully this never gets back to me. But I dislike the constant insane overpricing that has been happening to it, because it's, yeah, as you're saying, who's supposed to be able to afford that? Like, even at my wage, which is decent, I look at that and go, what the fuck, that's expensive.
Like, my parents would never have bought me a toy that was $80 when I was a kid. Never.
Same.
Never. Maybe as the only thing I got for Christmas. That was the only thing I got. I got nothing else. I might get that. That is so much money.
It's
and
obscene.
I mean, I go to the store at Walmart, and there are some toys that are still affordable. Like the He-Man figures are like $20. Still too much for an action figure that has zero articulation. But at least no one's going to break that thing. You could hurl it against the wall. Nothing's going to happen to it. But, like, I hate the fact that toys are that expensive, especially with the fact that they've marketed them in such a way that they want people to buy them on a whim. You don't buy an $80 toy on a whim, man. Just don't.
You don't buy an $80 anything on a whim.
I mean, I do, but that's because I have a problem. That's not because I should be doing that.
You have a whole channel based around that.
I do, in fact, yes. Kevin, you might have thought you were safe, but you're not. I was thinking about you this whole time.
Oh, I don't know how
Creepy.
I feel about that.
You shouldn't feel good about that. It's a bad thing. We're going to rewind this conversation quite a bit to before I started talking about toys and got carried away. We're going back to nostalgic technology. Rewind your mind. Go back. Put it in the VCR rewinder that looks like a car and has headlights. Rewind a bit.
The what?
Did you never have one of those? You know, when you had VHSs and you had to rewind your VHS, you'd put it into that separate machine that was just for rewinding VHSs?
No, we
Only
just
me?
had a black VHS player that could rewind.
Yeah,
It's a
same.
black square.
Oh, we had both. It was like, but it was shaped like a car because you'd put the VHS in it and you'd push the top down, like it would pop up and down, like an old tape player type thing. And it had little pop-up headlights on the front. And while it was rewinding, the lights would be on. And then when it was done, it would pop up again. It was really cool.
That's
I didn't
cool.
realize that we
I
were the
wish
only
I had
ones who
that.
had like, yeah, we used to have external like rewinders because the VCR would like eat tapes more often because they weren't as like, these things were supposed to be safer for your VHSs. Dead technology, no one knows what I'm talking about. Doesn't matter. Stops making me segue. My brain is like smashing into the wall every time you do this. You like
Look,
you stuck
okay,
a VHS
you
tape
started
in front
this.
of my brain.
You started this with your hey Kevin, stick it back in your brain VCR and rewind
I
the
was
tape of your
trying
life.
to paint a picture, assuming you had the same childhood as me. I keep forgetting that you're babies comparatively.
What the fuck? I'm not that much younger than you.
Yeah, but when you look at how fast technology grew, you're like a million years younger.
My
than
brother's
me
the
for going
same
by that.
age as you. I grew up with the same
And?
shit as him.
No, it's not quite the same. We were developmentally like. You were like 13 when I was 16. That's different. Completely different.
Oh, I was horny back then too.
I'm not letting you ruin my technology rant by talking about horniness. Okay. A piece of technology I really wanted back then was a digital camera. So my parents scraped together a bunch of money and got it for me as a graduation present. Super happy with it. That camera is a piece of garbage now. My phone takes way better pictures. Kevin, was there a piece of technology that is now obsolete that you really, really wanted when you were younger, but that you finally got and is now no longer useful?
No, can't say that I have. Back then, I was a very, very, very simple child with very simple needs. My parents got me this thing called a Nintendo 64, and I was happy. I didn't need anything else.
Damn.
Man, I'm jealous.
See, when I was young, I still remember this is going way, way, way back when I was like, I don't know, 7, maybe younger. At my school, we had these old video recorders that you had to put a videotape into.
Yep.
They were a fucking brick. They had a pad on the shoulder so you could rest them on your shoulder while recording because they were that fucking heavy.
I want one so bad.
I got my hands on one because I found one thrown out. Of course, it was busted, so it didn't work anymore. And there was some sort of electrical fault with it. I remember having that thing and working on that thing for years trying to get it to work again. To the point where I had my phone that could record things. I was still working on it, trying to make it work.
So funny enough, me and you, we used to go to the same church. That church, we don't go to it anymore. But when they updated their supplies, they threw out their video camera that was right in between that one and the mini DV, which used the half-size VHSs.
Oh.
And I still have that, and it still works. I only have 2 VHSs for it, but it does still work. However, when the school board was throwing out their stuff, because my dad works for the school board, they threw out an entire box of mini DV recording tapes. And I have 70 of them unopened right now, and I have a mini DV camera, and I have been using it to record things. At some point, I'm going to make an entire episode of my channel on it. It's going to be great.
You should make an entire series on it.
Anytime I look at a retro toy, I should do it, yeah.
The big thing there will be, how do you get it onto your PC?
That is the only reason I haven't done it yet, because I don't have the cables. It's actually not that hard with a mini DV, because the mini DV came out after computers were a thing. So they don't have I don't think it has USB, but it has the one right before USB. So there's adapters for it to USB. So it is a thing that I could get probably on Amazon, I would assume, pretty easily.
Okay, you should definitely do that and start doing your classic reviews with the classic recorder.
Slight spoilers for an upcoming video. Caleb bought me some retro toys for my birthday. I'm going to do a video on those.
Oh, now you know what you need to use to do the video.
Oh, yeah. It was a wonderful bit of drama when he ordered them, and then they finally came, and I am super happy with them. They are the coolest things. Toys were also just better back then. I know that nostalgia blinds you, but toys were 100% better made back then. Certain toys, at least. Like the old He-Man figures, the old Street Sharks and stuff, they were actually chunky, and they were solid. It's not like today where they make a toy hollow to save money on plastic. I hate that garbage.
Makes them lighter so the kids don't hurt themselves picking it up. It's safer now.
No.
Now they can't bop each other on the head anymore. It's so safe.
No, Kevin. Now when they bop each other on the head, it shatters into sharp little shards that embed themselves in their heads.
Good, they learned to cut a motherfucker.
Toy manufacturers don't care about safety. It's very brittle, Kevin. Very brittle.
They care about money. Of course they do.
Lawn darts. That's all I need to say about that.
Okay, so interesting tidbit.
Kevin, do you not know what lawn darts are?
The lawn dart is actually based off of a Stone Age weapon.
So, Kevin, if you don't know what a lawn dart is, it's exactly what you think it is. It's a giant dart weighted on the end with a giant blade on the end that you are supposed to throw at a target in your yard. Can you think of anything that could possibly go wrong with that?
No, absolutely. This seems like a family-friendly game to do in large groups. Extremely large groups.
People died. Kids died. Many kids died because of lawn darts.
Lawn darts and lawn javelins.
Yes. I don't know who thought it was a good idea. Almost as bad as those science kits that came with uranium.
See, it's a miracle I'm alive because I had lawn darts and I would hurl those fucks straight up as straight as I could, as hard as I could, and then we would run around and dodge the lawn darts coming down at us.
Okay, so from the years 1978 to 1986, lawn darts were responsible for an estimated 6,100 hospital emergency room treated injuries. Hospital emergency room treated injuries.
And how many corpses?
It says it also killed 2 other children, a 4-year-old and 13-year-old, but I'm not reading the whole article. It's just a little, Google snip at the top.
Only
So I
4
don't know how
deaths.
many
That's
people
not
killed.
too bad.
No, I think there was more than that. It's just that I'm not reading the whole article. It's just 6,100 hospital emergency room visits. I mean, the easy bake oven hurt people for like. There's a lot of stuff that hurt people, but I mean, kids are stupid. My dad used to like him and his friends would take a small tree, bend it down, and then like strap themselves to the top of it with a belt, and all the other kids would let go.
See,
So
I wish when we were young that we were smart enough to think of a belt, because we would bend down the tree and just hold on. We didn't go very far. We'd go like 6 inches before doing a frickin' flip and landing on our faces. It was the best.
I remember doing stupid shit as a kid. This is just a nostalgia episode. What are we going to title this episode? Just nostalgia? Nate's nostalgia? Kevin's just silently sitting in the background like, my childhood was boring. Why? What am I going to do?
It was pretty boring. Did you guys ever use those? This would be back in, I think, the 90s, actually. There was like remote control cars that were big. And that was a huge.
Yeah.
And then they made remote control like flying helicopters.
Yeah.
And my brother got fucked up by one. It lost control of it, and it literally like went at him, and it's like an actual helicopter. It's got rotating blades and nailed him right in the face.
Oh my.
Boy.
See, I wanted one as a kid. I did not get an RC helicopter ever. I got an RC car when I was in like grade 11 finally, and it was the coolest.
Dude, do you remember those remote control cars that were like sound activated that came out in the 90s where you could like clap and stuff and it would like move forward and things like that?
No, I did not. I did not have that.
Oh, I had one. It was so stupid because it didn't work at all.
See, I remember the robots that you could talk to, like the T-Rex and shit.
Yeah, like the robot dog pets and stuff, Furbies. Yep. Oh no, not Furbies. Don't think about Furbies. We know, like, indeed. My possessed Furby is still on the loose. I don't know where it is.
It's hunting me. One day.
Man, 90s toys were great. Remember when board games were a huge thing in the 90s and there was like toy commercials for the board games? Like, do you remember the Rat Trap commercial or the Mouse Trap one?
Unreal. That was like every second commercial.
That whole jingle. It's still stuck in my head. I could sing it right now. I won't, because I'll give you PTSD, but it's in there.
I forgot the jingle, thankfully.
Thankfully, have I. But,
I might have to bring it back to you guys. I'm posting it in the chat after we're done. I'm putting it back in there. Do you remember Perfection? There was a Perfection jingle too. All of them had jingles. Like Connect 4 had one. You got me where I can't see. There, diagonally. Oh man.
That's the thing is, you had to have a jingle back then because you couldn't count on me actually seeing your commercial 4,000 times a day.
Yeah.
So it actually had to be a unique, interesting, and memorable commercial. You know,
the Perfection one was
that
pretty
doesn't
good.
happen now.
The Perfection commercial was pretty good. That guy who goes like, "Wow!" goes Perfection. Like all the things coming out of his chest. Oh man, that was great stuff. And then there's Elephant the Elephant and sorry, getting into trouble. It's fun getting into trouble, right, guys?
Oh my!
Getting in was always fun.
The rage that game induced for you just land on top of someone like, no, you bastard!
Yeah, back to start. What are you guys doing? Getting into trouble.
Oh, I never actually played it.
Guess Who? Do you remember Guess Who?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I've even got they're all stuck in my head now, and all I can think of is jingles. Can you guess who? It's a mystery, man.
I played Guess Who like twice.
There's also everything had a jingle, like United Furniture Warehouse. I'm assuming you guys have heard that one.
Yep. The brick.
Budget Breaking Muffler.
Yep.
Oh.
The Midas Touch.
Yeah. And then the Keogh Mortgage. I remember that one too.
Yeah.
All of these jingles, man. Oh, I'm a little bit nostalgic for some of this stuff. Like, it's awful, but I kind of like it, and I remember some of this stuff very fondly. I'm gonna have to pull out some of my old recorded VHSs just to watch some of these commercials, man.
We should definitely do some sort of episode where we watch commercials, but
we should. look for that. I think we should do an episode where we look at old commercials and like talk about them.
Just like
That's
we're
a
going to have
great
to do
idea.
an episode where we
Put a
make
pin.
Kevin watch a bunch of movies.
Yeah, put a pin in that. Maybe it's happening if we're not too lazy.
Well, look, we've got years. It'll happen eventually.
Yeah, but we should definitely cut it off. We've probably been talking for like an hour and a half, if not more.
We are
and I
at
could
1
keep
hour
going.
and 13 seconds, so
I could
we're gonna cut
easily
it
go
there.
longer. Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching,
Listening.
You might have watched something on the screen. Goodness knows what it is. But we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh.